I'll briefly introduce each of these panelists, and then we'll jump right into the talk. Elisheba Johnson is, yes, is a curator and public artist, administrator, and disruptor. Feeling left out of the traditional art world, Johnson has dedicated her career to building bridges for artists of color to grow and thrive in our local arts community. She was the owner of Fair Gallery Cafe, a multi-use art space that held art exhibitions, concerts, poetry readings, and creative gatherings. Johnson went on to work at the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture and currently co-manages Na Wari, a Black arts center in Seattle's central area that uses art to build community and resist displacement. Nick Ferderer is the founder and creative director of Basecamp Studios, 2 downtown Seattle studio and gallery spaces for artists pushing the limits. Before Basecamp Studios, Nick worked at Microsoft as a business strategist and in Washington, D.C. as a government relations expert. And he has worked in economic development, community organizing, and electoral campaigns. Nick's current creative practice centers on developing immersive, community-centric experiences. Kate Bailey is a new media artist and creative technologist whose work merges electronics, robotics, and biofeedback to create immersive, interactive sculptures and installations. Her work has been featured at multiple museums, including MoPop, the Museum of Museums, Bellevue Art Museum, and the New Museum. Based in Seattle, Kate dedicated over a decade to designing innovative electronics at Microsoft, most notably as the lead designer of Microsoft Surface. She is also the founder of Actualize AiR, and an artist residency offering free long-term studio space and resources to emerging artists. Dominic Nieri is a local curator and creative producer for fine art and film with a mission to support and nurture artists in Seattle and beyond. He was formerly the producer for Meta's Open Arts program in North and South America, as well as For Culture's Soto Track mural project. With his art production company ARTXIV, Nieri worked on projects like Seattle's Forest for the Trees, a sprawling summer art festival in Seattle's Pioneer Square, as well as a series of murals by local artists in Pioneer Square. And last but not least, our moderator, Margo Vansynghel, is a journalist covering the rich cultural fabric of the Pacific Northwest. She's been covering Seattle arts for 8 years and is currently the Seattle Times Arts Economy reporter. With her writing, she aims to help people understand not just how art is made, but how art is made possible. All right, and I'll pass it to Margo.
Thanks everyone for being here. It's kind of incredible to see how many people care about art. And I hope you had a chance to check out the space and the art studios. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here to talk to these folks. I think we have about 50 minutes for the panel, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So let's jump right in. And I want to start with the space itself. We're currently sitting in a former Banana Republic store that once was a theater, and now it's filled with artist studios. And I'm going to start with the most obvious returning question, which is affordable space. There is not enough of it. At the same time, we also have a lot of space. There's a lot of commercial space that is sitting vacant downtown. So all the folks who are sitting here, you know, you've all of the art spaces you founded have kind of taken a novel approach to using space in your own way. And I'd love it if each of you could talk a little bit more about how this plays out in your art organization and your model. And Elisheba, do you mind starting?
Okay. I guess I'll just start and explain what Na Wari is. So I was like, wait, how do I jump into that? One, I just think that like alternative space is really important, right? Like if we don't have space to make work, then how do we actually have a thriving arts community? And I think like I've never left here, I've been around the whole time. So there's been like really cool pop-ups and artist spaces that were in places with no heat and not little, like very little security. So I think like taking spaces like this is really important and being able to give it back to the community. So anyways, it's just exciting to see 29 artists all in one space and be here. So I just wanted to say that first. Na Wari is a social practice project where 4 artists, me, Inye Wakoma, Jill Friedberg, and Rachel Kessler, really wanted to see if we could save a Black-owned home by using arts and culture as the strategy. So we decided to rent the house as that social practice project or action, and we give it back to the community as an arts and cultural center. So over the last 5 years, we've become a formalized institution, raised money, and then bought the home and gave it to the family as a permanent gift. Thanks. But I started going to, I got into art when I was about 17. And even though I grew up in an arts-based home, my dad's a writer, I never, ever, ever thought I could be a visual artist. I thought that was for white artists, the Van Goghs and the Picassos of the world, right? And so it wasn't until a teacher introduced me to Romeo Bearden, I actually understood where my place could actually be in this world and the storytelling I could do as a Black woman. So I say all that to say that like it is vitally important for people to feel like they can go into art spaces and not feel like they're being talked down to and that they're a part of the experience. And I think the art world has a lot of gates and doors that people have to pass through. So one, like us making this art center in a house was very much an anti-displacement strategy. Like don't get that twisted, but also it's not a white walled gallery where there's somebody staring at you as soon as you come in and looking at you like, and all of that stuff that we know we get, right? So people come into the house and they feel comfortable, they want to take off their shoes, and then we can have a different type of experience where people can really understand art. One of the stories I like to tell the most is like we had this really great video by an artist, Elise Peterson, where she's like, has a clip of Tupac Shakur talking about liberation. And then she talks about her own personal liberation. So council member Sawant was like doing a tour of the house, and she was telling us that in India, only the rich have access to the arts. And she had never seen anything in her life that spoke to her that way, right? Her watching this Tupac video talk about liberation, like it was the first time, right? And she's like in her 50s or 60s, where she actually felt like the art world was for her, right? And I think that's the work that we're trying to do is like really bring people into these magical experiences and tell them that it's not just for rich folks, it's for everyone. So I'll leave it there.
Kate, do you want to take it next?
Sure. Yeah, so we're in Actualize AiR. Essentially, what we've done here is we've repurposed this building and filled it with art studios. That's kind of our model. We are focusing on giving space to demographics of people that have been underrepresented in the past. It's an artist residency. So AIR in Actualize AIR stands for Artist in Residency. Essentially, we just encourage artists to apply through our website and for artists that work here, our residents, to reapply every year. So it's an interesting model. It's a long-term residency rather than these short-term residencies, allowing artists to really get comfortable here and in their practice. But we're just getting started, and the vision is really to be more than just like free space and community. We want to be an artist accelerator, essentially creating an environment where artists can thrive. We've already started our Curator tours, so we've got curators coming through and doing like studio tours with artists. We're working on our workshop series and our tech shop, which may be open to the public at some point. But there's a lot cooking, and this is just the beginning.
I'll just chime in quickly and say, just to make clear, the studios are free, right, for artists? They don't have to pay for it?
There's zero-cost studios. Yeah, thank you, Margo.
It's very rare, just to put a finer point on that. Dom, do you want to take the question next?
So a little background. The festival that we were talking about, Forest for the Trees, it was started in 2013 in Portland, Oregon, as like an outdoor mural festival. And the founder, Gage Hamilton, moved up to Seattle during the pandemic in 2020. And during that time, Okay. During that time, we created a partnership with the Rail Spur development in Pioneer Square. And Pioneer Square is like a neighborhood that I've been really particular about. Like, I've loved it there. I love the frequency of like the art walk and the tradition there and the galleries. And so we were presented with an empty space and had to like develop a program basically in, I don't know, 6 weeks time to match up with the Seattle Art Fair, which I think is like a very important tradition that's been happening in Seattle for the past, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Yeah, so we did the first activation, and there was a understanding that something was going to come to this space, but in the meantime, you know, we could have like free reign. So we just kept pushing. Yeah, and exhibitions and studio spaces, and basically I've just been running like a series of like tests and hypothesis and just like experimenting. So yeah.
Oh shoot, I gotta sound smart now. So I blame my dog for Basecamp Studios. I was walking her and I had this big old canvas and, well, first, sorry, let me back up. Basecamp Studios is 2 locations with a gallery and artist studios. The thinking being that the studios are 24/7 sort of life in the space, and the galleries provide openings and other opportunities to show, which causes folks to come, who then visit the studios. The studios become attractive as a result, and it becomes a bit of a virtuous cycle. But again, I blame my dog. Her name is Maya. She's very cute. I was walking her to the dog park at 2nd and Bell, 3rd and Bell actually, and this garage door was open, and I said, "What's this space? Can I paint here?" And the guy was like, "Let's have coffee." So we had coffee, and then he's like, "All right, you can paint here." And I was like, "Cool, I want people to come." And so then I invited people to come through the Belltown Art Walk, and it was fun, and so I kept doing it. And then he closed a couple of businesses that he owned, and I was out of a spot. And Amy Tipton, who at the time was running Sassafras, now it's, well, it was Slide, and then now it's Slip and Slide next door. She said, "Hey, you can have a studio." And I said, "Cool." So I came over, and I was in the basement painting alongside 5 designers. One of them, Sherry, now has a studio at Basecamp too. And I was like, "Hey, this is pretty smart. These folks are designing clothes and selling them upstairs, and it's just kind of making the whole process work." It's like, I could do this. I have an MBA. And so I put together like a little, that wasn't meant to be a joke, but I'm happy you find it funny. And so I like put together a back of the napkin thing and was like looking at vacant buildings because there's a lot of them. And again, I was walking my dog down to Olympic Sculpture Park, and this guy was painting over some graffiti, and I said, "Hey, can I do a mural here?" And he was like, "All right, let's get your number, maybe, I don't know, at the end of the month." And he was a real estate guy, and he knew that I was looking at buildings because I'd called the firm that he had listing some of these buildings, and so he called the first guy that I had studio space from. He called Amy, and then I live in Belltown as well, and so he called my landlord. Actually, I told Lars this story as we were walking the other day, so sorry to be repetitive. And apparently they all said I was a decent human, and so he called me back and said, "I got this vacant space. What do you think about it?" So I went and looked at it, and I was like, "This is cool. I bet I can have some friends here." So then we added a couple of people. Then the next month we added a couple more, opened the gallery. The month after that, we did a block party. The month after that, we did movies in the parking lot, and we've just continued to like fall forward. I should shut up. That's kind of the story, and it's been real fun. I just talk about a lot of the things that I hope we can do and how we can make a better neighborhood, and people like that. It seems to be a lot of fun. I see a lot of friendly faces here, which makes it easier to talk about this story. And I look forward to the next question.
Well, and just to follow up, now you have a second space in the Bergman Luggage Building. That's right. When did you open that?
I signed that lease the last weekend of August of 2023, and then started taking 50,000 pounds of junk from the second floor to the first floor, and we made an exhibit out of it, which was really fun, called Ghost of Belltown. People came. And then we cleaned that junk out and then had like a white walled gallery. There's still some spots that I want to fix up, but that's between me and the walls. And then we've been doing shows since December, I think, of 2023, and then opened up the galleries upstairs, or the studios, excuse me, upstairs in the first person that wasn't helping moved in on October 30th of last year.
Okay.
So 3 months.
And I bet people are wondering, like, okay, but how did that all happen? How did you do that? And this is a question for all of you. You know, the things that you're doing are only possible because you're either creating resources or getting resources. That's either funding or space or labor. So I'm curious what kind of resources each of you has been able to access, and which ones have been harder to access or hard to access. Whoever feels most compelled to start first.
Everybody look at me. Okay.
Just in my line of sight.
How do you get resources? Well, we actually self-funded. Me and Inye took our vacation money and paid the first month's rent. And then we started a GoFundMe campaign. And I feel like it was successful because all four of us at that point of our career had a very large following of people. Also, I feel like we've lost so much affordable cultural space. So when we opened up, people were very excited, like, oh my gosh, we need this. And we had lost so many galleries at the time and stuff like that. So I think that the community is thirsty and hungry and wanting to support these types of things. And then we fell into the nonprofit industrial complex. So we apply for grants, and we have amazing individual donors. And just trying to figure out creative ways to keep this going. I am a socialist and have a lot of issues with capitalism, but also want to pay my artists and make sure that they're thriving. So it's like a push-pull. But yeah, I mean, I think if you have a good idea, there's money out there for it, is what I've learned. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. So yeah, Actualize was lucky enough to team up with two amazing women, Sherry Banky and Edie Adams. Yeah, super lucky. They saw the value in what we were doing in our third and union space, the Nemoto space. We had a tiny 10-person residency over there. We lost that space, and they encouraged us to go after this space. We did, and we got it, which is crazy. And that propelled us to turn it into a 3-person. We teamed up and became co-founders, basically. So I've got an amazing team now of these rad women who are helping us not only pay for overhead, but also pay for things like materials, like these walls that we've built that break up the space into studios. The walls themselves were built by our residents. So if you were here last April, you would have seen like a sea of resident artists and volunteers, mostly women, hammering and sawing and painting and putting up these gallery and studio walls. Was quite a process. It was like a little wall factory. But yeah, once you build it, you have to activate it, right? And that is no small task. Like, so For Culture has been helpful in helping us finance that, but the work that it takes to actually put on an event like this was kind of our missing component. So that's where Julia Anderson comes in. Yeah, woo. Late last year, we got teamed up with Julia, and she just came through with like a passion for activating space and for creating community, and it's exactly what we needed. And she envisioned this very event. So thank you, Julia.
I think a little bit differently than your guys' projects, but our model was never meant to be sustained. Like, it wasn't something that had the idea of permanence. So it was more, we were rallying around these like specific like sprints of projects. So having an idea, having a project, and then, you know, having 6 weeks or 2 months to try and execute it. So it was like the focuses were different for the fundraising and the support. And we never were charged for the space at Railspur. So like a lot of the work was done by like volunteer or like materials that were donated. And so just with the resources that we had, trying to like make it the most dynamic thing possible and keep shifting, because I was mostly like trying to figure out how to make it different every time, comparative to I think like a traditional gallery where you're trying to build like a, I don't know how you would say it, it's like yeah, like a collector base. Or so we wanted all the events to be free and open to the public, and so shifting the focus every time to try and introduce a new community to that space was like the goal. And then with like the outdoor work, that's something, you know, we had applied for grants for, like work privately with the building owners and just continually being persistent and patient. I think that's like part of the game. So yeah.
It's just in wherever you can find it, you know. Basecamp 1 was sort of break even, but I was at Microsoft. Then I got laid off from Microsoft and was like, I'd rather do-
Self-funding with your own salary.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I'd rather do this. And Sam Ferrazzano, I don't even know if he knows this, but he's the one that planted the silly seed in my head. It's like, we'll just get a second building. So I started looking, and the second building, the way that the lease is structured is like low risk, but the landlord would make more if we're more successful. So it's like low risk, but you know, it kind of can get interesting. And the secret sauce for Basecamp is finding a friendly landlord, like somebody who doesn't want their spot being really bad. The first spot was vacant, and it was a little bit of a cancer that spread out. That's my words, not the owner's. And he had a soft spot for arts in his heart, so he let me take that space. And then the second space was, you know, fenced off, broken windows everywhere, and he just saw the need to not have it that way. So I said I'd come in. I made him pay for the replacement of the windows because that stuff's expensive, and we've replaced a few more since. But the model is that the studio rents would pay for everything, but that's just not true because we want the studios to be affordable. So Shun Pike has stepped in, and we're fiscally sponsored by Shun Pike. Thank you. Lena's somewhere. And Joe. Joe is somewhere. Joe's right there. And so that's allowed us to receive donations from folks, and people like the story, so they donate, which is great. I remember the first check, and I was like, wow, now I got to get a second one. And then I see some Paul Allen folks in the room as well, and Amber Rose. I don't think, maybe she came to I don't know if she did or not, but somebody from Paul, no, she did. She's nodding, she did. Came to Ghost of Belltown, and we were talking, and so Paul Allen stepped up with some grant funding. And then on May 17th of 2023, when the mayor announced the DAP thingy, I sent an email and said, hey,
Downtown Activation Plan.
yeah. I said, hey, you guys typically like fund, you know, pay the lease and pay the artist. I've already got a space, and I didn't really have the space yet, but I was in negotiations. It was like 90% there. It's like the final thing, like, are you going to pay the full amount for the windows or not? And I'm going to get you to pay the windows. So that took a long time to materialize, but then Seattle Restored, we got a partnership with Seattle Restored, who subsidized 50% of the rent for the already affordable studios upstairs for a specific amount of the space, and then provided some tenant improvement funds along with that. Hi, Gabriel. I forgot to mention you. You're right in the front. So that helped us like renovate everything, and the zero on that budget was my labor, and my dad's labor, and Paul Nunn's labor, and Ben Hubbard's labor. We have a like studio agreement with everybody, so it's fair for everyone, but it's a lot of volunteers, and like this is gonna pay off in the long run, and thankfully, hopefully it is paying off. I mean, I'm sitting up here saying like I know what I'm doing. Again, we're following forward, but it keeps coming. Also, one more thing. Sorry to ramble. A lot of folks come to these spaces and will take selfies in front of the artwork, and it's very free to do, and like free to come in. We like that, but that doesn't recognize the artist's time that went into creating that, the time for the organizer to let you know that the event was there, or anything. And so it's just not sustainable, in my opinion. And so in some instances, we have charged like an entry fee, which is very artist as biased towards the artist, so that artists get paid with the thinking being like, hey, I'm making some money here. It's fun. Let me come back. So you kind of create a hotbed of activity. But for the last show, Store, we were able to, I don't know if I'm allowed to say how much we paid out to artists, but it was nice. I think it was nice, and that felt really nice. Yeah.
And that brings me to kind of a follow-up question about art sales. You brought it up, but I didn't notice a ton of other folks here mention it. How does that factor into your model, if at all, and what does that say about Seattle as an art market?
We're not a gallery, we're in a presentation space. So we do take 50% of sales, but it's not our main business. And I'm much more interested in immersive experiences and installations that, don't sell. But yeah, we do sell some work. I've been able to sell some Zenobia Bailey and some other cool stuff, get money in artist pockets.
Yeah, we love to sell work. It's amazing. But we wanted to provide the artists with a studio-like environment, right? Just as if you would have a studio in town, like back in the day when you could actually afford to have a studio here. You would have somebody through for a studio tour, and they might buy a piece directly from you, and you would be able to keep all those profit. We wanted to provide that same thing for artists here. So artists deal with the transaction, they sell their own work, and it goes all to them.
Yeah. Converting the effort into sales is a full-time job for sure. Whether it's on the artist or the organizer or advisors. I think, yeah, advisors are great. If you're focused on, putting on the event and, building the spaces, it's hard to, do the final part, which I think is the most important. So, but yeah, I don't feel like Seattle's like a very hot art market where, people are selling out shows constantly. So I don't know if that's a reflection of like people here locally or if there's not enough attention like nationally or internationally about Seattle as an art scene. But I think all of these spaces and the efforts that everyone's been doing hopefully is, changing that perception. And over the next few years, there'll be more eyes from afar looking. So I think everyone should just keep working.
Yeah, and I want to follow this up with a conversation that is, especially since the pandemic, been ongoing, but with audience behavior changing, how do you cultivate new audiences? What and for your space, what kind of audiences are you looking for, and why is that, and how do you go about that?
We just try to have fun. That's one of those. We just try to have fun. And if people come and ask, hey, can we do this crazy show? Jeremy's like, can we do a wildlife show? I was like, sounds great. That sounds wonderful. And then he's enthused. All the artists are enthused. And so just trying to help folks make their dreams come through, as cheesy as that sounds, but it's been working so far.
Okay. I mean, our main focus is engaging with Black folks across the diaspora, right? So everybody's welcome. Please come and enjoy. But like my key demographic is Black folks, all over the world, right? So, and this is a demographic of people like myself that were left out of the art world. So we have been kind of getting creative. We do movie nights, we do other types of events, and it's interesting, like our other events, people will come for that, and then we can have a conversation about becoming an arts patron or loving the arts. We just had our Kwanzaa lights, which is actually an arts thing. But people come, they usually have never celebrated Kwanzaa before. And then again, it's a great opportunity for us to be like, this is a space for you. And then we tell them to go look at all the art. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I want to come back. I didn't know about this or art gallery. So we kind of use our other programming. We have like 5 other programs. We do oral histories. We have a gardening program. We have a community meals program. Our community meals program, we get like 99% Black folks from as far as Renton and as south and as north as Everett. So again, like really thinking about how we can engage that community to also feel like the arts are for them. So this year we're going to be building in some like programming with our meals. So those are some of our approaches, and also just like being really neighborhood based and people knowing. We didn't realize until we opened how important it was to have an art center in your community. Like people being able to walk to a place and not have to like go find culture. And I think being in my 20s and the early 2000s in Seattle, culture was everywhere. And I think that we want to get back to that place.
Yes, you're here. So we're trying to do something a little different in terms of, like, instead of trying to convince people that aren't into art to get into art, at least so far what we've been trying to do is to bring together art communities that have been separate so far. So there's seems to be a lot of places where you can go and see, galleries and see dialogue between artists. It's beautiful, and there's a lot of amazing institutions that have really solid communities of art supporters, the Sam, the Henry. But it's at spaces like these, actually, like alternative art spaces, that you're starting to see these communities come together and mingle. And that's what we're trying to really nail here at Actualize. Everybody wants to be able to say they saw the band when there were 20 people at the show, right? So, like, how can we provide that experience to people that want to get on the ground level with these emerging artists? So we've collected some of the best artists we can find in the city. We've put them all in one place, and we host cool events that brings in all sorts of people. So inclusive environment. So.
Yeah, Dom, I know that you've worked, I think with artists in LA, and you've kind of have kind of an international scope. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you approach that in your work.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting and like fortunate being able to travel and work on projects in different cities around the world, because you're able to see like, what that scene is like, what has been successful, and then apply it like really locally. And so, like I said before, a lot of the work has been project based. So really being prescriptive about like the what ifs. And so it's just been a lot of series of what ifs. And it's like, we know there's this built-in frequency of art walk. Pioneer Square is located, next to the stadiums. So there's like these concert crowds or the sports crowds. And so just like asking a lot of questions like, what if you see like 50,000 people flow through the neighborhood on any given day, like going to the stadiums. And so it's like, oh, what if you could interest them in art, for the first time? So designing events to like basically be traps, And so, yeah. And so just running experiments and seeing like, oh, maybe this will work, maybe that will work. And then as far as incorporating other artists from other places, like I think it's really interesting when you bring an artist that's not familiar with Seattle to Seattle, it kind of opens this portal between the two places. So not only is that artist getting an experience for the first time of Seattle, but then local artists have access to that person. And so you see when everyone's working collectively on like a single project, all of a sudden now they have a friend that's from Poland or from New York or from LA, and they're like more likely to go visit that person or get involved in that community. And then also like digitally, like through social media and stuff, when you introduce someone from outside the community, all of a sudden their community is looking at yours. So you're creating this larger network that allows that conversation to grow, which I think is important. So yeah, we try to always, balance the two ideals. So working with local artists, but also introducing people so that, they're familiar with Seattle and giving them a good experience, because I think that ripples out into the world. So, yeah.
And audience participation is just one metric, and Elisheba mentioned, neighborhood and relationship with the neighborhood is another. So I'm curious about what other metrics you use to define your success as an art space. And if, Nick, I know you've talked about kind of your presence in the neighborhood and Belltown, so maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah. Yeah, we're very, very tied into the Belltown community. I go to all those meetings. I've just expanded into the downtown community, which is a little nascent. But last night was at a forum with different elected officials, and I don't have to do too much of an intro, which is kind of nice, but also I like my anonymity every once in a while. And just telling them what we're up to, what we just did, what we're doing next has been great. And then it becomes a little bit of a small world. It is a very small world, but then somebody comes up with a cool idea and like, oh, have you talked to this person? So being connected, I mean, Jenny just got a spot in Belltown, which is exciting. I think I have to talk to you about a press. I've got a press that you might like. But like creating those connections and then moving to whatever comes next. How can we help you? How can you help us? Doesn't have to be transactional. That sounded transactional, but just knows from a good spot.
And how do you think about your impact on the neighborhood? Is that something that you think about as an art space?
Well, for the Paul Allen grant, I have to document all of the impact. And I mean that in a good way. But like it's kind of, I'm more of a storyteller, like the qualitative side of things. Like, did people leave with a smile on their face? Did they meet somebody? Did they have an interesting conversation? Did they buy a piece of work? So smiles on faces is kind of like, again, a cheesy line, but I think it's important. One of the metrics is, was it a vacant space? Is it now no longer vacant? So we checked that box. We do keep track generally of how many people come. We obviously can keep track of how many sales are made. We've never had a studio go vacant. So sometimes like Brady, he called me up at like 9 in the morning, and at 8 that morning, somebody said I was moving out. And I was like, well, we got space. And so the connections between artists, the vacancy, I guess. I suppose I should get more Excel spreadsheets about this. But I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what you guys measure.
It's a shifting target because I'm an accidental executive director. So what did we do? A couple years ago, we decided to double down. This was like the second year of the pandemic, and like choose joy as a leadership team. So that's when we actually started our oral history program, and Jill was really excited to do that. And then that's when I started our artist in residence program. So we have an artist in residence program. And really just thinking about really cool projects that get us excited. Last year, we gave all our staff are artists, working artists. So all of them actually created a piece for Walk the Block, our big community festival, which was fun. And so, thanks. So this year I'm really trying to figure out, like, if we're all working artists, like how can Na Wari feed our work and our joy so we're not just doing spreadsheets? And so I can't talk about this event. I have a really cool event that's gonna be happening soon. And when I can make it public. But anyways, go to wanawari.org and sign up for our email list because we have some really cool things happening. But basically this year I'm really focusing on exciting curatorial projects. So we're working with Danny Terrell for our cake dance, which will be really great. I'm already planning Walk the Block with national and international artists. And I'm just trying to like have fun or do really exceptional, unique experiences, because just doing rote like show after show, even though that's really cool, I think that's not exciting enough for me. So success for me is that I'm super proud of the work that we did, and I feel like we're doing groundbreaking exhibitions and experiences. And my fundraising consultant keeps making fun of me because every year I keep saying I need more money, but I do need more money to do bigger things. So, but basically, I just want to work with more artists and give them more money to do bigger, better work. So that would be my success.
That's cool. Beautiful. Yep. I guess ultimately success looks like our North Star is, can we make Seattle a place for working artists, a destination for working artists? But in the short term, what that looks like is, how can we support our residents? How can we propel their careers? Just giving them space to have studio tours, to make work, to have dialogue with other artists, to land shows, and to, meet possible art supporters or collectors. We have this metric, I don't know where we even got it from or if it's even true, but that it only takes 3 art supporters for you to become a full-time artist. 3. So if we even land, one artist with one art supporter where that their work resonates, like, we're winning.
Yeah, I would share that. Like, I think by the time it comes to the event and the celebration, like that's always an afterthought. I think for us, like the real event is when the artists are working together. And I've been lucky to organize these projects where kind of everyone's working collectively towards the similar goal. So it's not like a bunch of artists working on different things. It's everyone's kind of focusing on one thing. And so, like, through that, I think the measure of success is like when those like what ifs grow legs, and whether it's like a curator expanding their vision and like going off to doing more shows, or artists like learning techniques from each other, or just if everyone leaves with like better off than they started, then I think that's like, yeah, a good metric.
Running out of time, so I'm kind of gluing 2 questions together. Feel free to like take from that what you will, but I just want to get as much in as I can. I'm curious about like the things that haven't worked, like the roadblocks you've encountered, and then the thing that I'm like, adding on to that is, what would you need from the city, from policymakers and other institutions in order to thrive more? So those can kind of tie in together. Whoever feels.
Let me complain.
Do it.
I joke. I'll put a positive spin on this because I do think we can get better here. The permitting process was a bear. And I don't want to get into too many details, but there are just arcane things that need to be done in the name of safety. And I can understand and debate on both sides, I suppose, but in the name of creating a space that otherwise was vacant and by any, rational person walking by is not a good spot, like it doesn't make sense. And we have a dearth of those downtown. Like everywhere you go, it's a vacant space. So how can we do that? I can get into more specifics, and I have talked with lots of people about this. Including lots of elected officials who've come by Basecamp and other people who influence elected officials. And I think, I don't know, maybe I can announce it. I'm not doing anything, but I think we're going to be working on something over a long period of time. Some sort of, the notion, maybe I'll just test it out here. I don't want to make news, but like this notion of a permitting holiday in advance of FIFA, because everybody wants to have a nice shining city where tons of people are going to come visit, and we're going to put our best foot forward. But a lot of these spaces downtown are old retail spaces, very, very large retail spaces that have been vacant for over 12 months. And per the code, that means that you need to then reestablish occupancy. Now, if you change occupancy at all from anything other than retail, you have to do a change of use. Change of use means that you have to upgrade seismic. Again, it makes sense safety-wise. It really does. I get it. But it also means that you have to look at like energy codes, so daylight harvesting. And we're starting to get into the weeds where if it's sunny at noon, you have to have a light system that turns down so that by 5, the light system turns up. And again, I totally get it. I'm all for energy efficiency, but like we weigh that against a vacant space. And we also have to have some sort of I don't know. There's carrots and sticks, right? Like, how do you get a friendly landlord to say this isn't going to be a bunch of artists running around causing a muck, right? Like, that's not true. None of these spaces are that way. We've all done great things in our neighborhoods, and so we should be given more chances to do other good things. And it doesn't have to be us. It could be other people, but the permitting process is really, really challenging, and the onus is oftentimes on us. So you call up and you say, hey, this is my idea, and they say, you got to talk to fire. So then you talk to fire, and fire tells you what to do. And then you do that, and they say, oh, but you got to talk to this person. So then you do that, and it's time that just gets eaten up. And time is money, lack of a better term. Like if you're paying rent and you can't do this, it just doesn't work. So some sort of permitting holiday that takes into consideration the alternative, which is a vacant space, not doing good for its community. And I mean, again, I used to be in government affairs, and so I can count votes sometimes. And I think there are 5 votes for people that have just talked about this with. It's a matter of getting it into legislative language that they can then vote on. And I suppose maybe by round of applause if people in here agree. So we've got like a little audience here to, yeah. So don't be nice when you go to city council though. Like say, hey, good job, but also do this. And also thanks for doing that, you know. I think that's what we could do. That's a nice positive spin on the permitting challenge.
Yeah. Who else wants to talk about their roadblocks and challenges and things you would need?
Also would like to complain.
Bring it on.
Buildings just need to be easier to get. Like, just to echo what you're saying, like, oh my God, there's so many amazing buildings downtown right now that are uninhabitable because the previous tenant took all the plumbing fixtures out. So now it's going to be $100,000 to put all the plumbing fixtures back in before anyone can inhabit it. Then you got to do the permitting. Like, this is crazy. Don't take the plumbing out. Also, maybe there's like, I don't know, a tax for having your building sitting empty. Yeah. Yep.
You're going to complain more.
I do have more. I'm holding back.
I don't know. I don't know how to fundraise. I don't know how to get people to spend $250 for a dinner and then give me another $50 to $100. So if anybody knows how to do that, I need some coaching. But yeah.
Well, like I think what's interesting is that I don't think as like a community we've recognized or let go of like some sort of old model where we want like big box retail to like occupy these spaces. Like, and the whole landscape has changed, you know, with like the internet and ordering things. So like, when are we going to let that idea go and use these spaces for something else? So I think that's like also interesting. It's like, but the uncertainty that like lives with that we have to like carry, knowing that if Banana Republic wanted to come back, we would be out tomorrow, you know? So it's like, so I think that uncertainty is difficult because, you know, you never know how long you can be somewhere. So how can you invest in it, or, yeah, like what can you plan for? So we end up doing these like little sprints of like, oh, let's get it this far, let's get it this far, let's get it this far, and then, but if we keep living with the expectation that, you know, I don't know what's across the street or any of these empty spaces with the old signs, like they're gonna come back. It's like it's not gonna happen. So, might as well figure out something else to do.
Great. I feel like that's a really good place to stop and open it up for questions from the audience. That sounds good. Okay. We'll pass this mic.
Hello, I'm Kathleen. Okay, for the 3 of you with landlords still, have you had conversations about what would happen if they suddenly got a new person interested in the space and how that would displace you and what they would do to compensate you? And then my follow-up question is, has anyone in the city ever offered to pay you a salary, all of you?
The first space that I had, they both have redevelopment clauses in my leases. The first one I renegotiated after a while. It still remains. The second one, it was on the phone, but I said, hey, if we could be honest with each other and just look each other in the eye, you're not going to have a buyer lined up and this building's not going to change hands for at least 3 years. It's going to take you a year to negotiate. It's going to take a year for them to do due diligence, and it's going to take a year to get permits. So give me certainty for 3 years. I can't remember exactly how it ended up, but I also negotiated an amortization clause, meaning that if they did take it out from underneath me, I estimated how much money it would take me to get it up into a usable space. And then I looked at like where the gap in that would be. And I was like, all right, if this building gets sold in month 11 or 12, I maybe lose some money. But if it stays, then I'm okay. Like the project will pencil out. And he agreed to an amortization clause. And for the salary, I agree.
I'll just, yeah, I guess I'm a little frustrated too with the whole like lease thing. We spent 4 months negotiating the lease for this building, 70-page lease document. It was a whole deal. About 2 weeks after we got the keys to the building, it went up for auction. Yeah, so new ownership, and it's up to them whether or not they honor our lease terms. So TBD.
Yeah, it's amazing that you're solving the problem of space. It's so incredible you're solving the problem of space for the artists. Something that people often come to me to solve as an artist that has a gallery and maybe looks like, you know, the system is working, is they say, how do you sell your work? Well, I hear you saying that same thing. You get this space for the artists. There's beautiful pieces behind you I would like to own, but I'm not allowed to buy any more art. And I can't seem to convince anyone I know to purchase art. There are so many people that live without art. It's a lost art form, collecting. And I'm just curious if anyone is working in that little pocket. Like, is there an organization that will purchase art and then find homes? Just donate it to families in the community so that they can see what it feels like to be living with what we're making. Because I feel like at this point, they're almost like tokens that are not being picked up. So,
More of an observation than a question. Yeah.
yes, a share.
Well, I think it's like, yeah, to convert the effort into sales. We had a really fun conversation one time about what would it look like if some of the larger corporations gave like an art buying allowance to their employees. Like that could be really interesting because once you start collecting, it like becomes contagious. Like you have to keep going, you have to keep going. So like, how can you get them hooked, you know, in a way? And then it creates this environment where people are going to shows and buying, and it's not like a risk, you know, they're just supporting it. So I think that's like an interesting thing comparative to artists spending a lot of time trying to like apply for grants and, you know, they're a great painter, but they're terrible at writing or something, you know, or like they don't want to do that or spend their time. And how do you balance allowing people enough time and space to, you know, improve their practice and not like focus on, you know, fundraising? Like as an artist, it's not your job. So, yeah, I think like allowances are some, yeah, like you're saying, like a low risk way. Yeah.
Maybe like to, instead of investing in a 401k, that you are allotted a certain amount of investment and then perhaps go back into the arts.
Yeah.
Program.
Yeah. Something to get, yeah, more people involved. Because I think like collecting comes with like an education, and I don't know if like, I don't know where the disconnect is in like either a certain generation or, you know, but like going out and spending $2,000 a weekend on like food and drinks, you know, could go a long way in an artist's life. So figuring out how to change the perception of buying stuff.
I'm just wondering if you can speak more into the idea of what you have seen change or shift in the climate of the city in regards to the conversations that you're having with landlords, the conversations that you're having with elected officials about how they feel about the creativity in the city and how they want to support or the lack thereof in the city. Because I think, you know, like this is something that grows and y'all are forging into it with limited support from the city. So like, what's the dialogue feel like? Is it changing? Is it changing for the better or the worse?
And this is when I get all doom and gloom and cynical. I mean, you know, everybody wants to like cheer us on, but they don't want to give us any money. You know, the city of Seattle cut the arts office's budget last year. Right, like real talk. And I mean, I know the city's in a deficit, but they came after the ad tax money and took it back from the arts, right? So I think there's a lot of talk in this town, and I think there's a lot of inequity baked into how we live in Washington State. There's no state income tax, and right now the state's in a like what $80 billion deficit or something crazy, and the city. So you know, we're not fully funding education, and the tech industry. Sorry, not to beat up on tech, but is an industry that is not necessarily about touching down and being engaged in your community, right? So we found that they feel like they're not connected. And I was just talking to somebody earlier today. They said they used to work in tech and they were told like, oh, well, I don't want to buy art and invest in the community because I'm just trying to make as much money here and then go to the next place. I have my dog and then I'm moving, right? Which is what we feel. We literally feel that from the people who moved in here. And so one is shifting that. I did a project called Collect, for 5 years with some friends, totally just for the love of it. And most of the people who came on our Collect tours were tech workers. And the thing we found out was that they were too intimidated to go to art walk or arts events because dun, 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 people treat you crazy. So that's, if there's a bigger soapbox I can get on, it's as a field, we need to be friendlier, right? Like I love the didactic, intellectual part of this field. Also, we got to bring more people in. If people feel like they have to already know about the work to go see the work, they're never gonna do it, you know? And it doesn't matter how much money I mean, there's people who have money that won't, you know what I mean, that don't feel comfortable. So how do we do that? Anyways.
Anyone else want to take that, answer that question before we? Just make sure that there's.
I'll paraphrase another politician by saying I'm an idealist without illusions. There is a lot of talk, and sometimes it goes on, and then it shifts to a different committee, and it goes on and on. But I also like to think that, at least in the small little 4-block radius that I walk all the time, it's getting better. And I like to also tell them, like, this is what we've done. And so if you do invest in this, this is maybe what you can get in return. And so kind of like asking for what I think is needed and then being persistent about that. In friendly, like persistent and friendly, which is a hard line sometimes because like, you just told me last week and it's taken, yeah, but I don't know. I think it is getting better, but again, it could just be a 4-block radius here. I don't know.
We have time for one more question. We had one person there. Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess I'm thinking about how this is a conversation between people who are starting spaces. And what I think is really special about this moment in Seattle is that you guys are all artists as well in this community. Like everyone that is here right now is a working artist, is interested in the arts, kind of knows each other. Like this is a special time that things are accessible or could be accessible. And it feels like to me, I'm also an artist, right? I have a space at Basecamp too.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi. And it feels to me like it could either tip one way or tip the other. And like, we're at a point where hopefully it will continue in this way and like we can keep getting spaces and people can keep adding to the community until it grows into a space that is internationally well known so that people want to buy art and it becomes a deep, rich artist community. But it's also like there are all these people here who are ready to do something. There's all these buildings that are empty, that are ready to be inhabited. And it seems, how can we get these people who have energy to give to like contribute to the effort that you guys are pushing and starting. And where is that connect? How it's just as simple as, I think really it's about the resources. And it's not enough, I think, for it to be like, we met at a party and then I called them back 5 times and I got to use their building. You know, like, let's make a system so we can utilize the energy that's available now, while it's available now. So what do you think about that? And in your experience, yeah, just I'd like to know what you think about that.
Love this. Yes. Turns out that like you can actually do it. Like you can go after a building and you can get it. Like maybe not the first one, but the second one maybe. Like Seattle Restored offers an awesome course on how to negotiate these leases. It's I think Gabriel, you're involved in that. Talk to Gabriel. But yeah, never in my life have I seen Seattle like this, right? Like I've born and raised here. I've seen the city being taken over by tech. Artists have to leave. It's too expensive. And now all of a sudden, I mean, thanks to COVID, oddly enough, we have this giant expanse of emptiness downtown. It's depressing, honestly. You drive down 4th Avenue and it's like a ghost town. 3rd is even worse. But when you drive by Basecamp or you drive by Actualize, you know, there's something going on in there. You know, it's like kind of cool. It gives you hope for the city. And I think, you know, there could be a lot more of this. I think just like breaking that wall of that's somebody else's job and just say, like, if you want a space, go for it. Get a space. Talk to Gabriel.
Because there are systems in place that people are just learning about, like Seattle Restored, like Shunpei. And those organized systems to access the resources from the tech people who might feel excluded. You know, that is an opportunity to bring things together. And I think that there are tech workers who want to create a culture, who want to give their money to people who need it and who want to give back to the city. And so bringing those two things together seems like a disconnect that's almost there, but isn't quite there yet. So I guess like you guys have found that connection. Is there anything that you've seen that you could highlight that would maybe be a step closer, you know, other than like the amazing work that Shunpei and Seattle Restored offer?
Well, I think that like the living in the idea of like a gift existence, you know, to get things started, is good, and it's gonna help like open these spaces and get things going. But I think it comes down to us to making that conversion. So like, you know, if there's 30 artists, it takes $100,000 to survive in Seattle. That means like that year, that space, you know, could generate $3 million. Like if everyone was successful and working and doing their thing. So at that point, could you just pay rent and then they're not going to take it from you? So like, how do you convert it into some sort of commerce? And whether that's like through selling artwork or doing creative events or, you know, charging entry fee or whatever, just getting creative to like make these things actually economical, where there's no question of existence, you know. It's like we're fine because the landlords have to make money somehow too, you know. And there's costs built into these spaces like property tax and utilities. And so if it's not just based on gifts all the time, then, you know, I think it can become permanent.
Something tells me there are a couple of journalists in the audience who might write about it and have more people learn about it. And maybe also some people who care about the arts here who have some dollars to keep moving forward. And then hopefully those just continue to multiply.
Exactly. I think this is a good place to wrap up for tonight. I'll pass the mic to Julia for final remarks, but just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep coming out to support the arts, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I'm just the energy and enthusiasm in the room tonight and with this discussion really feels hopeful to me, and just speaks to a shared desire to really center artists in this moment. So that's wonderful. I hope this panel was insightful and even optimistic for the future. So I want to mention quickly too, please support these organizations and spaces by attending some upcoming events. Basecamp Studios has their Smash Putt mini golf opening on February 14th. So that should be fun. Na Wari has their next opening on March 1st. So that should be Actualize AiR will be open for the Downtown Art Walk on February 28th. And ARTXIV has curated and produced the art collection at Hotel Westland, which is opening this May in Pioneer Square. And then as a collaboration between Na Wari and Actualize, Vanessa German will have an artist in residency here at Actualize from February 17th to 19th. Okay. Yes. And we're now open for the rest of Downtown Art Walk, so please get a drink and enjoy these artist studios, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.